John here. This is part 5 on how to build a giant 3D printable 7-segment LED. Last time we left off putting the 7 single segments together into the full form of the final figure 8 for the 7-segment LED. Now we got to concern ourselves a little bit more with wiring. There's 2 things we need to do. One, we need to put some holes in here to bring the wire into the shape so that the wires can come in. We can attach them to the LED strips that'll be sitting in here in each of these segments. And we also need to knock some of these walls out between these sections so the wires can go from one to the other without having to cut and break little notches out of these walls. We should design it so that it is pre-printed, ready to go. All right, so in this section we're going to talk about these access holes and how we're going to decide to implement them. So what do we need to know here? How is this going to work? I want to just put a cylinder in here and subtract it. Done. Simple. Wires will come in here. Okay, great. But there's a little more to it than that. So if you have an even number of strips, like I do here in a 2x5, I call this 2 strips by 5 LEDs in each one, you would need to bring the wires for the power and the data in here. Now the way I wired mine is I connected up to this first strip right here, and then the first strip I connected to the second one here, and I go around in this order like this, around the inside of the top of the final shape. Then I come over here and I go around the outside of the bottom up there like this. And when I get to here I actually turn around and I come to this strip here, and then I go reverse inside the bottom and outside around the top. And then the wires end up with the strip here. So the data and the power goes in here, up and around, comes on back down here where the data and the power comes out. And I can run the wires back out through the same hole. That would be fine. And that'll work for every time there's an even number of strips. As you can see, if I go up, come back here. If there's 4 strips, I'd go up, turn around this one, and come back down. That way I'd still end up where I started if there's an even number of strips. If there's an odd number of strips, let's say I put 1 in here instead of 2. I'm going to start here, go up and around, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to end up over there. So I'm going to want a hole over here if I have an odd number of strips. So if I have 3 strips like this, another odd number, I'd go up here, go all the way around, come back down. I'm coming down in the middle here. I'd turn around and go up here. And again, ultimately, I'd end up over here. So whenever I have an odd number of strips, I want a hole on the left bottom here and the right top there. All right, so let's set that up so that is how this works. All right, as a general rule, we want to parameterize everything. So how is this going to work? Let's add a value here for, I already did, the wire hole size at 4.5 millimeters. That's handy. When I was first sketching this out, I guess I forgot to delete that. Anyway, that's what this variable here is going to be used for. Okay, let me make a copy of that. What are we going to do? Down here, when I create a segment, I'm going to add a parameter here that says, make me a wire hole. And the way that's going to work is I'm going to go somewhere, and I'm going to put a cylinder whose diameter is the wire hole size, and whose height is, what do we need for the height? Well, as you recall, the thickness of the segment here, of this back, or what would be the front, if it happened to be the front, is this value right here, IZ, the thickness of the face or the backing. So we want to put a hole, we need a cylinder at least this big. I'll show you a little bit of a phenomena that is annoying about the preview mode here in a minute. If you happen to make this exact, what'll happen is the preview will mess, will get a, it'll get visual noise in it. So sometimes what I normally would do is I'd make the cylinder bigger than necessary, so it starts above and goes through and ends below. That way the preview will print it cleanly. But let's look at that really quick here. Now remember, before I move this segment up here, it started up down there, and this is the center of the segment. So if I want to put a hole down here, what I really want to do is move down and just stick it in the middle. That seems fine to me. What do I need to do? I need to move it halfway down. The inside length would give me here. I could put a cylinder hole right there, but that's too high. I want to put it down between these two, right? Well, the distance from here to here is half of the inside width, because this is the half of the hypotenuse of this square that's sitting inside here, right? So I need to go half of the inside length plus half of the, actually a quarter rather of the inside width, right? Because this is half of a half is a quarter. So, and that'll be in Y. So don't move in X. I want to go to minus whatever the inside length is over 2. Let's put parentheses around here. The total amount I want to move is IL over 2 plus IW inside width over 4. And don't move in the Z. So I put a nice error in there. That's because I don't have a variable for that yet. Let's use a variable with a default in it. And I'll just set the default to true, just so that we can test this out. Now every one of them will have one. You can see what happens now in preview mode. You can see that the image is flickering in there. If you do a full render, it'll come out fine. It should anyway. You can see it's taking a little longer to render because we've got an awful lot of stuff in there. This is also, it doesn't have a lot of facets on it. We might want to throw a few more facets, make it look a little bit better. Equals 20. Now we're in the preview mode again. So as you can see, preview mode can be a little confusing at times when there is some visual noise going on, and that's because the cylinder meets the surface exactly. So what you end up with is a zero length little layer of skin across the top, and when you're previewing it, it just has a hard time deciding whether or not to show it as solid or not. So what I do in these cases is I just make the height of the thing extra big, so it sticks out in both upwards, sticks up too high and it sticks out too low. That way there is no confusion. So I'm going to add 2 whole extra millimeters to this. Now that's fine in the top, but it's not fine in the bottom, right? So what do I need to do now then? If I'm going to add 2 here, I'll subtract 1 in the Z. Now there's no problem. It'll render it fine every time. Whether I'm previewing or doing a full render, you can see both cases. The cylinder cut out for the wire hole will be fine. All right. Now you can see that there's a lot of them in here. You don't want one in every corner. That's because I set it to true by default, and this is new code of the new variable. So there's nothing that ever invokes this that changes this value in any way. I'll change the default back to false, so now there is none. So what are we doing here? Remember, we create segments for the face as well as the back. The face, we don't want to have holes in them. So by default, anytime a segment is created, let's not have any wire holes. So when we're creating the back up here, the back, this is one back segment. So I'm going to say wire hole. I'll pass that down. I'll create another variable here for the back. So if and only if I'm rendering a back, I'll pass a wire hole variable whose default is still false here back into the segment. So now when I create my 7 back segments here, and I'm creating the upper right one, which is, I should have labeled these, that would be positive X and positive in the Y. That would be this one right here. I can say, using a keyword parameter notation, that didn't quite go right, did it? Wire hole equals true would be nice. I want one there. And I'm still not seeing what I want to do. What am I doing wrong? Is there an error? No, I created a back. What? OpenSCAD is case sensitive. All right, finally we have the little hole right there. Oh, now my preview thingy went nuts. Okay, now you can see there's one and only one hole in the upper right corner, which is fine when we render the back. Now to make sure I didn't make any other mistakes, Let's go ahead and re-render the front to make sure there's not any mystery holes there. That's looking pretty good. Okay. I didn't follow that up. Too many typos at once there. Had me a little confused. So that should be pretty reasonable. And if I have one, number of strips is 1. The hole still looks pretty good, given that position and size. It didn't disappear, you know, off into the bottom or anything. The hole might be too big as this gets small. As it gets bigger, the hole might end up being further into the interior because I didn't really locate the hole based on the diameter to make it set in this thing here. I just made it move halfway between here and here, which is fine. You just need a hole to get some wires in and out. That seems reasonable. All right, now remember, when we have an odd number of sides, what we really needed was to have a hole down there as well as up here. So let's just leave this on 3 for a second and then come down here and figure out how to make the other hole. What are we going to do here? The back, when we create 7 of them, right? So the lower left would need one, but only if, so the upper right always needs one. The lower left is this guy right here. Let's start by just setting this to true and always putting one over there. All right, so you got a hole down here. You don't want it down there, you want it up here. Well, that's easy enough. You can just flip this thing around, or you can have a top hole equals true or a bottom hole equals true. I think it might be better to just spin this thing around in this particular case. So rotate, what are we going to do, 180 in the Z. Now we have a hole on top. All right, and it all fits together. Let's do a full render. Make sure we still have only 2 volumes, that it didn't kind of move something or something weird's going on. What with the slanting and all when I added that. Okay, no, we're still at 2 volumes. This is looking pretty good. But this is always going to make a hole in the lower left and in the upper right. So how do we only make a hole for odd numbered things? We change this to a simple expression using the number of strips. We ask if number of strips modulo 2 is equal to 1. That says now I'm true if the remainder of this divided by 2 equals 1. So if it's odd, it will be. If it's even, it will be false. Voila. Okay, now we have parameterized, automatically configurable. You always want 2 if you got an odd number of sides. So there's my access holes. We're all ready to wire, except for these all these extra walls I need to knock down. I'll do that in the next part of this series. We'll put in the code to remove the walls and connect these things together.